Welcome back to I Own a Business. Today we are diving into one of the most important but often overlooked parts of running a profitable practice, and that would be your optical. We're going to talk about everything from pricing strategies to improving capture rate and exploring what it really takes to compete with your competition and online retailers. So to unpack this, we've invited Chris Millette from Modern Optical. Hey, Chris.
Hello, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm glad you're here to join us. We talked a couple weeks ago, just getting ready for this conversation. So I think we're going to hit on some things today that really are going to resonate with a lot of the pain points that doctors are struggling with. If you don't mind, before we jump in, just so people have some background on you, maybe tell us a little bit about Modern Optical and your role with the company.
Yes, so Modern Optical, family-owned business, started in 1974. Today, we have multiple generations in our company. So, as an example, the Weissman family started the company in 1974. Ken joined the company in 1995, and then his son joined the company in 2022. And ironically, my dad worked for Modern Optical, and now my son works for Modern Optical. So when we say family, we really mean family-owned business.
Are you allowed to not work at Modern Optical, or is this like you're it's all in your family? There's no
Yeah.
do you cut
Well,
people off like kids? Or are they
yeah.
still allowed to show up for holidays?
Absolutely. So reality is, I was outside of Modern Optical for 20 years before I joined the company. My role at Modern Optical is Director of Global Sales. So I get to manage the sales team and actually get to work with customers directly on a daily basis. And so this topic that we're talking about today is a really good topic that I'm passionate about professionally because I love to help our customers and independent practices in general have a successful strategy when it comes to their optical.
And that's exactly what I appreciate about what you're going to bring to the conversation. It was maybe a few months ago, I was sitting down having dinner with a group of people and person sitting next to me I'd never met before, and we got to talking. And I won't mention the company, but he was VP of sales of a company that everyone in our industry has heard of. And he oversees hundreds of people in on the sales side. And it was a really interesting conversation to see and hear his perspective on things. So I'll be curious to hear your perspective on things as well, but that's where we're going to go with the conversation. And before we drill down into more specifics, maybe right out of the gate, broadly speaking, what would you say are some of the most common pricing mistakes that you see practices make when it comes to optical?
This is quintessentially the foundational start for any successful practice, having the right pricing. And specifically speaking, when it comes to frames, my favorite question to ask customers is, how do you price your product? And at first, you get a little bit of a blank stare. And then the common answer is, oh, we just take the wholesale price and we mark it up X. And that's a successful piece to establish a baseline for the retail price, but it doesn't actually take into account true profitability. And to have a successful practice, you need to be profitable as well. And so the biggest error that we see for most practices is they apply a common price strategy across multiple brands and multiple price points. The example would be three times markup. So if I take a frame and it has an $80 wholesale price and I mark it to 240, but I'm currently buying from, let's say, seven different frame companies that have an $80 price, I'm actually getting seven different discounts, which means my profitability will vary seven different ways on the same transaction of $240. So that's it. That's probably the number one mistake. The number two mistake that we see, or another common mistake we see for sure, is understanding what you want to market to your patients in the practice. So for sure, the last 20 years, we've enjoyed a very good ride for the customers to be brand specific and they go after certain brands when they come into practice. But we're actually seeing a shift away from that. A lot of consumer data recently shows that brand is not as important as it once was. And so for a lot of practices to continue to chase that brand dollar, where potentially the margins are shorter and the competition is greater, That's another piece that we see that there's a great opportunity to change going forward. So I would say pricing and not taking into account discount is the number one issue that we see with it. And number two, not having a good strategy for the consumer and what the consumer is looking for to match said pricing and profitability for the practice.
Let's unpack these, starting with the first one. What would you say then to the practice that says we price it that way, which I assume is probably the case because it's simple
Hmm.
and it removes complexity. So for practices that take that approach of more of a customized approach to pricing their frames, how would they do that in a way that doesn't add to their plate of things that they're already doing? Because that it sounds like more work. Is there a way to automate that or some simple approaches to that that could make that simpler?
So there are some ways to automate it. But at the end of the day, it does come down to one person in the practice understanding their true acquisition cost. So if we leave, let's leave the medical world for a second. Let's leave optical. If you were a business owner of something else where you're selling a product to the customer, on the back end, there's these profit calculators. Like, what do you want your margin to be? Do I want my margin to be 60%? Do I want my margin to be 17%? There's a variance, right? So you have to look at that item that you're selling. What is it? What's the average cost? What's the average price in the market? So the complicated part is having different discounts from different frame companies. You can simplify that by saying, I'm only going to buy from these frame companies where the discount variance is not great. So if I know that I'm getting average 20%, maybe one is 25, maybe one is 30, but the average is 20, then that theory works. But the reality is you actually need to take the time to create a spreadsheet and put in that wholesale and the discount so you can see what the net is. And this is where it becomes extremely important. Insurance plans. So I know we're going to talk about insurance plans because that's the elephant in the room for everyone. But you look at some of these insurance plans where now we're seeing the retail price, the frame allowance, if you will, to the patient increasing, increasing, increasing. And so that's going to play a huge role in the true profitability. So you have to take the time. There's no shortcut. I wish there
Okay.
was. And unfortunately, a lot of the softwares that I see out there that practices use, um, they have an ability to create a price for you, but I have not seen yet. Maybe it exists, but I have not seen yet a way to enter into the same software your discount to calculate your net. If that did occur, then now you have that ability to just say, show me what my average retail is, show me what my discount net price is, so my true acquisition cost, and then show me what my profit margin is. So without that, they would definitely have to create a spreadsheet and put that in there, which on the front end could take a few hours, but then after that, it's
Mm.
set. You have that matrix so you know.
And it's probably time well spent. It's a good point. It said I just wrote
Yes.
down what you're talking that it's more work on the front end, but it saves you a lot of time on the back end. So all the extra work is sort of
Yes.
front loaded on that, but it's probably time well spent. A lot of the operational aspects of owning any business, right? You have to decide what's the best use of my time, and things like this would probably be a
Absolutely.
good ROI on your time. And that's a whole different discussion. But looking at something I do as a consultant is try to work with people on what are the things you shouldn't be doing, the things you should
Right.
outsource, stop doing, delegate. But again, taking the time to understand your profitability in the optical seems kind of important.
Yes. Well, and just to build upon that answer a little bit, what's your time worth? Right. So we always talk about chair time, and what's your time worth? So to take that additional 2 hours, and it could be the practice manager, practice administrator, or the owner that takes this time to actually create that tool and look at it and analyze it, because the math will start to resonate. And so the upfront time is worth the money, the hours, weeks, months, years later. So it'll come back to them a thousandfold if they do it correctly.
You already foreshadowed the insurance discussion, so
Yes.
we could take it there. So talk to me about that as far as pricing in a world driven by third party plans. And then you've got practices looking at, should I go out a network? Should I go private pay? I know there's not a specific question there, but just
Yes.
in general, you must hear this all the time from
Yes.
doctors. What kind of feedback do you have to navigate the pricing challenges in a world
Yes.
driven by managed care?
I, every conversation that we have with the practice and we say, what's your biggest challenge? It's a coin flip between managed care and employee retention, right? So
Mhm.
that those two things are one and two. So let's specifically stick with insurance plans. The difficulty with insurance plans for a lot of practices is there's a perception from the patient that this is a coverage. It's a freebie. So if I go, let's step away from optical for a second. I have dental insurance. If I go in for a general checkup and cleaning, I don't pay anything, or maybe I have a $20 copay. So if I go into a medical doctor or just getting a general checkup, I may have a $20 copay. So the issue that we have in the optical side, and I'm going to specifically say optical, not talking about the eye exam, the medical side, but I'm talking about the optical side, is that the hardware that we sell has a range of prices, has a range of options, and it's foreign to the patient in a medical way. So the challenge we have is reframing the conversation first with the patient to differentiate the medical side, the first half of the journey in the practice, from the retail side. And I'm going to say something really quickly that I think might be a little controversial for some of the listeners. The people walking in the door are a patient 50% of the time in the practice and a consumer 50% of the time. But I think when I talk to doctors, they always refer to them their patients 100% of the time. And so the insurance on this side is a consumer issue, not a patient issue. And so this challenge for us is number one, how do we overcome what's covered versus what's a contribution? How do I get a savings from it? And this is where, for the 20 years that I've been working with practices, this is the challenge to help the patient understand that if you have a $150 frame allowance, and I like that they said allowance, um, that you have $150 to spend. And it's helping them understand, think of it like it's Christmas. Someone gave you a gift card for Christmas. If I give you a gift card, Dr. Vargo, for Christmas, you're not looking to only spend up to the gift card. You're looking at this as a savings off of something that you wanted or desired even more. So we have to create that mindset with the patients. So when they become the consumer, that they understand this is a gift card. This is an allowance. You can spend as much as you want. But the mentality is, I don't want my insurance covered. So now we get into it, right? So we have this barrier between the practice owners and the patients, and it becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge in the presentation. It becomes a challenge in the reception from the patient because they have a mindset. So if we can start to plant the seeds a lot earlier in the conversation before they arrive at the practice, even helping educate them, if we could take the time to know what their insurance allowance is, to plant some seeds through the text messages or an email of reminding them, hey, you have this contribution for your glasses, uh, tremendous savings, use those types of words. So now we get into the other side of the conversation. And this is the profitability side of the managed care. And the challenge is going back to the very first question. If you consistently price product equally, the insurance profitability will vary from one patient to the next, to the next, to the next. And it does start there, right? It starts on the profitability piece, starts on understanding the discount. Because if I'm putting brands from this company versus another, and in the eyes of the patient, they're equal brands, but my discounts aren't equal, well, I'm going to make less money on one of those brands. So from that perception, um, they have to overcome the profitability piece by changing the pricing. And I don't think the approach should be just to buy extremely expensive frames. And because the reality is, if you buy really expensive brands, the discount is the smallest. It's ironic, right? So it's ironic that the more you spend wholesale on a frame, the lower your discount. But that's the way it is, right? So even that becomes a challenge because you could take a frame that has an $80 wholesale with a 50% discount and a $100 frame that has a 10% discount, and you'll make more money, net dollars. You'll make more money on the $80 wholesale frame than the 100. But yet in your accounting system, it'll show that you collected more money. So it's a false positive. It looks good, but when you get to your net's not as good as it could be. So that it comes back to that first question, understanding what's my profitability after the discount, after the patient copay discount, and subtracting the frame allowance.
Back where you started that conversation, the practices I've seen do really well with that on the reframing the conversation with the patients. They do a couple things. One, they really put a lot of effort into training the entire team because you reference the text messages and consistent messaging, planting that seed early. But there's a lot of conversations that can and will happen with multiple members of your team. So the
Right.
offices, if you're listening to this as the doctor and you think, well, it's been a struggle getting, training my staff. This is something that probably requires a consistent effort, not just one meeting, but an ongoing effort um, to do that. And again, just having that consistent messaging that goes around everybody. Because I've had practices say, and doctors say, we realize that I'm saying something in the exam room and we send it out to the optician and they say something different. And if nothing else, it just confuses the patient.
Yes.
So consistent messaging is really important. I, on the pricing aspect, and correct me if I misunderstood you, or maybe this is just leading into a question on brands. You're mentioning different
Yes.
brands with different discounts and pricing things differently. Let's step into the shoes of the consumer for a minute, because I agree. Once they
Yeah.
step out of that exam room and walk into the optical, they become a healthcare consumer. Uh,
Yes.
are we seeing more or less, or is it about the same patient or consumer sensitivity to brand? And this is more, maybe more of a consumer behavior question. What have you seen in terms of the the sensitivity towards specific brands of eyewear?
I love this question. First and foremost, the consumer mindset, right? Understanding what the consumer is looking for. Um, it's fascinating, the psychology of it. And what we're seeing, the changing consumer mindset is this valuation of experience, price, and then image. And so if we look at some of the changes over the last 5 years, uh, consumers are starting to rethink what brands resonate with them. What value does it speak to for the quality of life they want to have? And as the cost of everything has gone up across the board, they're having to reset that. And so what we've seen is, especially in the younger generation, that your image isn't tied to a logo on the side of the frame. Your image is tied to the look and how you felt when you made the purchase, and how it makes you feel when you're hanging with your friends. And so we are seeing a little bit of a transition away from brands. So the Vision Council puts out data, and it's survey data that they create once a quarter. And so that data has backed up that statement that when we look at where patients are spending money on eyeglass frames specifically, that they're either going all in, so luxury, or they're going at a lower category, which would be either considered house brands or considered entry-level brands. Additional survey data out there done by a variety of consumer marketing companies shows that over 70% of patients equate a store brand, a house brand, the national brand, if you will, as equal quality to a licensed worldwide brand. So I will plug one example, right? Costco. So Costco has the Kirkland brand, And for those of you that don't know, Kirkland is a suburb of Seattle. So, and Kirkland brand, people will go in and they'll get Kirkland brand vodka. They'll get Kirkland brand cheese. They'll get Kirkland brand coffee. And they'll say the quality is just as good and the price is great. So this is proof positive that the licensed brand isn't the end all be all, and more consumers are moving towards house brands. So Modern Optical, we only have house brands. These are our brands, and so from a quality standpoint, we're competing with all the other companies out there on a one-to-one basis. But on affordability, now we bring a little bit more value. So that's an example of how brand is changing in the eyes of the consumer.
Chris, I want to transition to capture rate because that's a metric that a lot of offices track and are very aware that over the years we've seen sort of an erosion of the number of patients buying from their optical for a variety of reasons. And I know it can be multifaceted, and you look at things like, having a good handoff and what is the doctor's recommendations or what are they prescribing in the exam room that translates into more sales in the optical. There's a lot of different things we can look at, but just
Yes.
overall from what you've seen, I would say uh, I would say a majority of practices will say they wish their capture rate was a little higher. Most are struggling to some degree with patients walking out. What do
Yes.
you see as the biggest causes of that, and what kind of steps can practices put in place that's going to retain more of those patients?
So there's three words that I want to build upon. So participation, perception, and price. And um, and when we think about those three words, they mean different things to different people. So let's start with the first one. When the patient is coming into the practice, their time is valuable and limited. And if you think about the patient journey, they check in. Potentially, some patients can check in before they arrive at the practice. They spend a few minutes in the waiting room, then they have to go into the pre-testing room, and then they go into the eye exam room. Half of their allotted time is spent on that first half of the journey. So now they're going to get to the other half of their journey. They're going to go into the optical area, and maybe they have insurance, maybe they don't. And we know that depending upon if they have insurance, it's a complicated conversation. So patients are now down to, if they allotted an hour for their eye exam, they're down to the last 30 minutes. And what we do know, going back to the psychology of the consumer today, um, time is valuable and convenience is key. And so when the sands in the hourglass are at their lowest, they don't want to be hurried. They don't want that experience to be rushed. And so some people choose to walk out not because of price. So now we get into the perception, right? Because the average practice thinks the perception is from the patient that we're really expensive. I think it's not about the price. I think it's about the experience and the time first. Now, it can be about the price for some patients. They just adamantly think it's too expensive here. I'm just going to get my script and walk. But most of them, I think if practices actually started to take the time to invest that piece, it's how do I start now to change the experience before they come to the practice? How do I start to embrace some technology to make the shopping experience easier? Because we know things like this, like two-thirds of patients before they arrive at the practice virtually try on frames before they arrive. How many of our listeners have virtual try-on technology on their website? We know that number is not two-thirds, right? So they're going someplace. And so now we get into the perception of convenience and actually the perception of how are you valuing my time as the patient? And I think if practices started to look at how do I improve or streamline that piece of the front of the process, so by the time they get to the optical, they can relax, they don't feel rushed, and they can have a good experience. I think that's truly where it starts.
There's data, and it's a bit um, research was done several years ago, so I don't know if it still holds entirely true, but I think the concept still does, and maybe the numbers still hold true, that they actually quantified how much time the minute the patient walks in the door the
Mhm.
office is on the clock.
Yes.
And what they found was you have about 40 minutes, 40, to
Wow.
get them from the front door into the optical. And the thinking was this, because I talked to the guy who did the research, and he goes, the hypothesis is this: it's that most people will give you an hour. We don't set
Right.
aside either literally or theoretically 38 minutes for an appointment or 47, right? It's we go in increments. It's 30 minutes, it's 60 minutes. And most people will give their eye doctor about an hour. We're thinking that's how long it's going to
Mhm.
take. So if you've got a lot of bottlenecks and inefficiencies in your system, which is something that we work with practices a lot with, where are those bottlenecks? But we
Mhm.
want, and it's just a better overall patient experience, things to flow smoothly. So just keep that in mind when people are coming in. I mean, you have excessive paperwork to fill out. Are you understaffed? Does your technician need more training? Where are the areas of friction? Because the thought process is if we don't get them in to the optical within about 40 minutes, they start looking at their watch and they start saying, you know what? I'm running short on time. I got to get back to work. I got to pick the kids up. If you get them out in about 40 minutes, even with an hour, that gives them a solid 20 minutes if they want to
Right.
look. Now, whether or not it takes that long, but I mean, would you say that there's probably accuracy to that, which would be a good reason for offices to shine a spotlight on inefficiencies in the practice that they need to work on, maybe on the front end, that's going
Yes.
to drive more business on the back end?
I think it's 100% accurate. And I would also say if that data is more than 5 years old, then the number has probably shrunk since then.
I
Because
agree.
as a society, for sure, the American society, we are impatient. And not to give any credit or plug another competitor for any reason, but Amazon, uh, they're now delivering on Sunday because you can't wait till Monday. That to me is just mind blowing, right? That's where we are as a society that we got to have it now. I'm going to order it this morning. I want to have it this afternoon. And so when it comes to that experience, it's the same thing. So the patients come in and you're on the clock. And by the time they get through the medical side, now the the shopping experience has the least amount of time. And by the way, it's the last of their time. And I think that's important to reflect upon. If you think anything else in your life of what you've done, this is all the time I have left. Where's your mental state? How are you feeling about that experience? And then we take into account, unfortunately, um, the the insurance experience and all the different questions, and this is how much, and you save this much. It gets to be frustration upon frustration for the patient. So they're a little bit, if you will, rushed when they get in there. And now they're faced with all these questions and going back to what does my insurance cover?
Hmm.
I think there's an emotional piece to that because they're running out of time. If you have someone who is 42, 43 years old in your practice at 1:30 in the afternoon, there's probably a greater than 95% chance they have to get back to work. So that's the other part of it, right? They have other things to do in their day besides just be here and say, ah, I got nothing. Now, if they're 72 years old, they might camp out in your optical department, right? That's a different conversation. But most of the patients that are coming into practice are working or have family commitments, and so to your point, time is important.
And that's exactly what happened in the studies that they did. When patients were feeling rushed, they defaulted to what does my plan cover? Let's wrap this up.
Right,
They didn't have as much motivation to look, and really the optician wasn't really even given the opportunity to introduce them to other brands and other looks, and they were in a hurry. Now, people who come back, there's danger in that too. When they say,
right,
I'm going to come back. What they found was about 25% of those people never came back. They went
right,
somewhere. They just didn't come back to you. And a majority of them actually, the average sale was lower because at that point they had forgotten everything the doctor recommended.
correct.
And again, we're back to that mentality of just give me what my insurance covers. When we don't see value, we almost always default back to price as being the main differentiator. And I
Yeah,
love that point of those numbers, and they are longer than 5 years old. It probably is shorter. I mean, you want to see what the future looks like. Look at your kids. I've got two
yes,
teenagers, and I like to say, they don't know a world where you can't get anything you want at the touch of a button. That's the future
right,
consumer. So if we're
right.
not taking that into consideration in the journey and the experience we're creating for our patients, there's real danger there in not connecting with that next generation of consumer.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put us in a time machine for a second and go back 5 years ago. July of 2020, the world looked very different. We were only a few months into the pandemic. And as a company, we recognized, what does this world look like when the consumer can't come into the practice, or their time in the practice is squeezed because you can only see so many patients and everyone's masked up, et cetera, et cetera. And so we started looking outside of the normal experience and started to understand where technology could benefit practices. And so we started to invest in a virtual try-on technology um, back in the fall of 2020. And I come back to that. How do we get the experience to be better and how do we get them to pre-shop? Um, there's an opportunity, right? So every practice out there has a website. How are you using your website? You just use the example of your teenagers on their phone. They're on their phone, and it goes up from there. And by the way, the danger with teenagers is they're on their phone and they're swiping. So that's a different conversation. But in terms of the time and the convenience, how are you utilizing your website technology to have the customer have that experience? Because they'll have time at 9:30 at night. They may not have time at 3:32 tomorrow when you're optical because they got to be somewhere to pick up their kid at 3:45. And that's the problem, right? So that's part of the problem, if you will, by the time they get back around.
Chris, I just have two more questions for you. One being, I think we agree on um, there's a medical side and then there's a sort of a shopping experience that happens in eye care practices. They are different. However you want to label them semantically, I don't
Yes.
care, but it is a different experience. And I've always felt that the optical under leverages one of the strongest human emotions, which is vanity. And
Yes.
I don't know if that transition always takes place where you're in with the doctor and it's a medical eye exam. You're in there whether you're getting glasses, whether you're in there for red eye, whatever the case is. And the doctor may talk about things in terms of different lenses or different solutions for eye problems. And then a lot of times that conversation continues into the optical. And I know that it's important to talk about technology with lenses and how that impacts your vision and all those things. But man, some people really just want to look good. Most of us do. And I
Right.
think that conversation doesn't happen enough. And I see even the training with opticians. I would like to hear more opticians say, you know what, this frame goes perfect with your face. The color of
Yes.
this matches your hairstyle or your hair color perfectly. Those sorts of things that get people excited about um, how they're going to, you mentioned it before, how they're going to look and feel, because it's emotions that drive most of our
Yes.
decisions. We try to get people to buy things through all these logical reasons when at the end of the day, 95% of our decisions go back to how we feel about that decision. So, do you see that as well in the opticalists that you work with, that there's a lack of understanding what really drives consumer behavior?
Absolutely. And it starts with what experience are you trying to convey or what experience are you trying to deliver? And in a lot of practices, um, they just don't have the opportunity to spend the time and the brain power to think about what is their experience. And one of the things that we always say to our customers, when was the last time you walked through the front door of your practice, not as the business owner, but as a consumer? Have a seat in the living in the waiting room area. Have a seat in the optical department and just listen. As a sales rep, we get to listen a lot, right? So we're there in the practice. We don't want to disturb the interactions with the patient, so we get to sit and we get to listen. And after 30 years of walking into doors, there's some experiences that I think are fantastic, and I think some experiences are they left a lot of meat on the bone. So you're specifically asking about the training. That's part of the experience. If you look at some of the most successful companies out there, they have dedicated and deliberate training. They are maintaining a certain level of professionalism. They're giving them a script. One of my favorite fast food chains out there, they actually have to reprogram someone's natural response when you say thank you. So if you tell someone thank you, it may be, no problem. You're welcome, right? Well, they have a very specific phrase they want every one of their people across the country to say. That's tough, right? To change someone's natural instinct response in milliseconds. So we have the ability to start to train for that. And to your point, on the emotional side, it is about emotion when it comes to buying a pair of glasses. It's how does it make you feel? What do you want from it? What do you want that experience to be a week from now, 3 weeks from now, a year from now? How do you want it to make you feel when other people see it? What compliments are you trying to get? Is it functional? Is it fashionable? These are all different questions. We all know that men are functional and men and women are fashionable, but there are some men that are fashionable and they want to look good. They want to feel good. How they felt at 35 is not how they feel at 55. So how do you approach that person who's 55 in your practice versus the person who's 35? These are all the technical aspects of the training to where if we could start to, as an industry, supply this to customers? Because I think it's an industry question. It's not a specific practice owner question. It's an industry question. How do we help elevate the experience? Because we do know the disruptors out there, they're training their people for the experience. Um, one of my um, one of my things to do when I travel and I have some free time is to have my reps take me to a Warby Parker purposely, right? To do a little mystery shopping, to go see what is it? Why do people like to come here and shop? And there's nice music in the background. There's a look that's consistent. The way that the opticians dress, they are consistent with the theme. And if you think about some of the practices out there, maybe it's everybody's in scrubs. Maybe it's whatever you want to wear today. And with the words they use from one optician to the next, to the next, the next is different. And the reality is words matter, meaning the delivery, the word is supposed to mean something, it's supposed to imply something, but it has to be consistent from the receptionist to the tech to the doctor to the optician. And training is important for that.
Yeah, extremely important. And I think when you do that, and when the patient's getting a that smooth transition and the message is consistent, it removes a lot of the barriers that prevent people from moving forward with the purchase. One of those being confusion. And it's
Right.
a whole I could go on this all time. We're wrapping up time here, but one
Yes.
of the main barriers toward people making a purchase is they're confused and they're not always going to ask you questions. Chris, we did the same thing years ago. With the company I was with, we sent everyone as sort of a secret shopper to Warby Parker. And I was
Yes.
the only OD in the group. The others weren't. So it was interesting to hear their perspective. There's maybe seven of us or something that we went separately, right? And we came back and regrouped and said, what did we like and what did we not like about the experience? And the number one thing that people liked about it was that it was simple. It was
Yes.
a very simple experience. And that's something I took out of that. I don't know if you walk into a traditional private practice if we're making it overly complex. There's not consistent messaging. It's confusing on the pricing. And I think that just goes back to training is making sure that we're
Yes.
making this taking something that kind of is not simple, right? I mean, it is complicated with insurance and it is complicated with different pricing, but we need to keep that on our side and figure out a way to translate it for the patient so they leave our practice saying, that was a pretty
Right.
easy experience for me because I do think, again, back to my kids, touch of a button, they want it
Right.
now. It's easy. We've got to get ready for that market because we're probably already in that market. We just don't realize it.
Well, I was going to say, I think we're 2 years past that mark
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of embracing technology and making it simple. But I agree with everything you just said that we need to make it simpler for the patient. We need to make it simpler for the consumer. And when we do that, I think we'll start to retain. We'll start to see growth in that category. And it's there. The opportunity is there. We know we still have the majority of the eye exams. Independent practices still have the majority of the eye exams. And there's a lot of insurance through, even though we don't like that word, there's a lot of insurance through the employers that drive those patients to the independent still. And
Hmm.
so we have the lion's share. We have to take the opportunity to invest in the tools uh, to improve the experience.
Well, Chris, this has been great. Like I said, I could talk on and on about this. So maybe we'll have you come back at a different time. Give
Would
a
love to.
Yeah, because this a lot we could still unwrap here with this conversation. But thanks so much for your time. Where would people find more information on Modern Optical?
You can go directly to our website, modernoptical.com. You can call us directly, 1-800-323-2409. We have representation in nearly every state. We have a great program for the practices. If you're a startup, if you're looking for some consultative solutions, some of the things we talked about today, how to help appropriately price product. Our sales consultants are trained on this opportunity and can help in the practices. So you can get us on the web, you can call us, and we'll have someone come to your office directly.
Easy enough. Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate your time today.
Dr. Vargo, thank you. Appreciate it. And appreciate everyone's time this evening as well, listening to the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks again to Chris. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.